up everyone? Welcome to Drummer's Perspective. My name is Ben Todd and I'm here to help broaden your scope of what's possible as a drummer. Thank you so much for tuning in today, whether you're listening on the podcast or you're here on YouTube. I really appreciate you wherever you are. If you are on YouTube, please subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell. That would really help me out. Today though, I have the incredible pleasure of bringing you a conversation I had with Mr. Joel Farland. Now, Joel is a guy who seems to be living the absolute dream when it comes to the type of work that he's been able to do over the years. Joel started out first and foremost as a drummer and percussionist, studying classical percussion in London, then going on to play drums with some incredible groups like Peking Duk, Lisa Mitchell, Broods, Miami Horror. He's since then gone on into the world of musical directing and producing for some of the biggest touring names out there right now. Again, everyone from Charlie XCX, Hayden James, Peking Duk, Rita Ora, Amy Shark, the list goes on and on and on. Joel has just done so much work both as a drummer and now as a musical director and producer. I had such an incredible chat with Joel. It was so informative, so inspirational. He's full of wisdom in all things about drumming for festivals and major tours, as well as musical directing and producing for some of the biggest names out there right now. So if you're a drummer who wants to learn a little bit more about what it's like to play for major artists on big festivals and tours, or perhaps you're a drummer who wants to get more into the world of musical directing and producing for major shows, then I know you're going to get something out of this chat. I certainly learned so much, and I know you will too. Please sit back, relax, and enjoy my conversation with Mr. Joel Farland. Before we jump into today's conversation, I want to offer you a free gift, and today that's my 7 Ways to Attract More Work as a Drummer PDF guide. If you feel like you're working on all the right things as a drummer, you're seeing some improvement in your playing, perhaps you're quite established in your music scene, but you just aren't out there working as much as you would like to, then this guide is perfect for you. Here I offer 7 ways for you to reapproach your trajectory as a drummer and give you a fresh perspective on how you might be able to attract more work as a musician in general. Best thing about this guide is that only one of the tactics involves picking up a pair of drumsticks at all. So if you want to get out of your rut, get out of that feeling of being a little bit stuck and just look for some fresh approaches to realign where you're going as a drummer and as a musician in general, then please head to drummersperspective.com/7ways and grab that free downloadable PDF guide right now. Joel Farland, man, thank you so much for taking some time today to chat with me about all things drumming and musical directing and producing. Man, we could take this conversation, I feel like, in so many different places because you've got such a wealth of knowledge, not only as a player, but now as an incredible producer, pulling together some of the most like amazing live shows that are going on in Australia and around the world right now. So yeah, man, I maybe we'll end up doing a part 2, but to start with, I just want to kind of hear your story of your journey, like how you started out as a drummer and percussionist into what you're doing now, which is just absolutely amazing.
So I started at my background's classical. So
Yep.
And from quite an early age, wanted to be a part of an orchestra and be involved in. I very much wanted a symphony orchestra job, and I was on that path from a really young age. And I didn't have the easiest run at school, and so when I was at school, I got bullied quite a bit. And so what I'd do during lunchtimes and before and after school, I'd head into the practice room. And so I'd been as a classical percussionist doing, xylophone, snare drum, timpani, marimba, vibraphone, all that stuff. I ended up changing to a music school, the Sydney Conservatorium High School. And then when it came time to do university, I didn't want to go to the Sydney Conservatorium because I'd just been there for 4 or 5 years. So I applied for a scholarship to the Royal College of Music. Mum and Dad couldn't help me out with all the fees. And so they said, we'll support you, but you got to figure out how to do the fees. And so I practiced my ass off and I got a full scholarship.
Wow.
And which was phenomenal. And yeah, I was very, very much on the classical stead. Then got there. My main teacher there was a guy called Kevin Hathaway, who's just a phenomenal teacher. And then one of his great things was he was at the Royal College, there are people who aren't just percussionists that have come out of there. There's a guy who's one of London West End's biggest MDs, a guy called Roy Beckland. There's a conductor called Tim Henty, who's done things all around with the Royal Ballet. Then there's arrangers, and so Kevin was a phenomenal leader in being able to pick this particular type of personality that was assertive, and what he was great at teaching was musicianship and how to make things exciting and how to make them great for an audience. And so many of those lessons that I went through with Kevin, I apply to everything today. Things like leaving the crescendo to the last minute,
Great.
And, preparing super well, and, how to prepare for a performance, structuring lots of little performances before the main performance. And preparing recitals and things like that. Then what was great about the Royal College was that there wasn't a jazz department, but that meant that I could take drum kit as well. And so Ralph Salmons, who is, again, one of the best drummers and most notorious drummers for big bands, movies, theatre. He plays in the Waterboys. Ralph is phenomenal. And he taught me so much about making things feel good, making sure that time was king. If I had good time, I'd always be able to get a job. I'd always be able to work. So great time. And concurrently, there was a great studio set up. And so I ended up taking composition for screen and ended up majoring that as well. So all those little things, I was always really interested in technology and how, I think as a classical percussionist, I got frustrated in that I wanted to be involved in the music making more, when even playing timpani in some of those huge orchestral works, you can be sitting around for quite a lot of time as opposed to the players who are playing the whole time. And so a need to be wanting to play more.
Sure.
So then in my first year, I met a guy who was on the opera course in the year above me. His name was Mika. And this is 2004 and 2005. And he had a phenomenal 4-octave range, and going, I'm going off to Los Angeles to, someone's found me and I think I'm just about to sign a record deal. Anyway, that ended up being Mika, who,
wow. Yeah, sure.
So I played on one or two of his demos that actually ended up being released, and I think they're somewhere online.
That's amazing. Wow, great.
Yeah, but that was my first taste into pop. And just seeing, I remember jamming with him, and before anything, just going, there's another way. It's not just this classical huge focus. And my listening was always really broad. So he goes off and becomes this superstar.
Yeah.
7-8 million records sold, and I was still in third year, and I was just going, this is crazy, because I was on scholarship and my very existence in the UK being locked to me being in that on that degree program. I finished, and I made sure, and all my professors were saying, just work hard, make sure you get a first class honours. And so I had a real focus to make sure I got that first class honours, which anyone in Australia that's high distinction, or in the States, I think that's Magna, or whatever the highest you can get. And so I worked hard, and I kind of put those dreams of, heading into pop just to the side for a little minute. And also just looking at Ralph and what my other teachers were doing, and they were still very much involved in that. And then at the same time, Darren Ferrugia, who's an Australian drummer, great, recommended me. He was living in London at the time, and he recommended me for this weird electronic band that was, I say weird, and now it seems really normal, but they would use MIDI pads to trigger visuals. And so it was like playing a live game, but what now is, one person can do with a really easy MIDI interface and everything. It was super complex, even back in 2005, 2006. And they came up with the idea, what's the hardest drum piece you've ever played, Joel? And I go, well, I had a lot of hard stuff, but I think something that has a sexy story to it is The Black Page by Frank Zappa. And so I played them. I'd learnt it for a thing at the Royal College. And they said, well, that's pretty insane. So they actually got a bunch of animators to do up a skeleton and all this kind of stuff of me playing the back page. So I'd play the back page and it would control this character behind me. And so that really got me on the path of multidisciplinary and thinking about things from the audience perspective. And that band flew me around the world doing that stuff. So I had to play the back page every night.
Not a bad gig.
Well, it's fine. It was a challenge to learn it, but once you'd learned it, you learned it.
Yeah,
like anything really.
Sure.
Then Martin Ware, who was in a band called the Human League, saw that band play. And Martin was what I guess Mark Ronson is now in the 80s. So he produced The Hard Line, according to Terence Trent D'Arby. He was in a band. He was in the Human League, and then Heaven 17. He produced Tina Turner's reboot in 1983, 1984. He was the producer du jour in the mid 80s of the cool kind of stuff. They wanted to go back on the road. So this is 2008 when I'd finished uni, or just finishing uni, the week I finished uni. And he said, we're going out on tour with the Human League, Heaven 17 and ABC. Do you want to come play? And it was like a large theatre arena tour. And I went, absolutely. And he goes, do you have an electronic drum kit? Because he'd seen me play that Black Page thing. That Electronics Edit was owned by them. Yeah. And I went, yep, I own an electronic drum kit. Anyway, immediately after that phone call, called my mate, just go, hey, if I get this thing, can I borrow your Roland kit? And he goes, do you know how to program it? And I was like, absolutely. I don't know. And I think Martin to this day still doesn't know I was lying through my teeth.
That's incredible. Wow.
Anyway.
You had the confidence anyway.
I think I probably worded it enough to blag it. But in my head, the tour was in 6 months. I was like, I can learn how to program something in 6 months.
Yeah.
So anyway, I got the gig and I ended up turning up with a Yamaha DT Extreme at that time, which was one of the first boxes where you didn't need a trigger to MIDI and a sampler, and essentially a whole rack of equipment. So learning how to program that was such a real eye-opener. And Andrew Small, who at the time was with Kylie Minogue and Massive Attack, I went and had a couple of lessons with him as to how he did his electronic setup. Going back to that thing, how do I get things sounding like the audience wants to hear them, and getting them sounding exciting. So this was 2008, just before the pop world. Pop world then was still Regina Spektor, Mika. It was very, Lady Gaga was about to hit or had just hit. And so when all of pop turned very electronic, I was there. I'd already had it. And so just by pure luck, Martin saw me play once and got my number.
Wow, man. What a progression. That's amazing.
So then so I played with Heaven 17. We did a lot. They became cool again. And so we did all the music festivals in the UK. We, toured through Germany and Europe, and later with Jules Holland and a bunch of TV shows. Then I moved back to Australia, and chasing a girl, and then I met. It took me a year in Australia to kind of find my feet, and Michael DiFrancesco, who's touch sensitive, and a great, phenomenal bass player and producer. He was in a band at the time called Banshee, and he'd heard of Heaven 17, one of the only people in Australia at the time who, had. And their drummer from Banshee had left, and he said, "Hey, what are you doing the next couple of months? The band's going to break up, but we've got all these dates we need to fill. Can you come around the world with us?" So I'm around the world with Banshee.
Wow.
And then Banshee folded. He said, "Oh, we need to get you another gig. Here are the Miami Horror guys, who were looking for a drummer at the time." So joined Miami Horror, then went from Miami Horror, then into Broods, a New Zealand band who were super hot at the time. Toured around the world with them, and around the time Ableton was becoming a big thing. And so with Banshee, I was running the tracks and off an iPod.
Great.
Bounced everything down. It was click left and tracks right.
Amazing.
And,
old school.
Yeah. So we went around the world like that. And apparently that's how the Presets and Daft Punk toured in the late. Yeah. Apparently so. But maybe not Daft Punk, but definitely the Presets toured like that. Then Ableton was just becoming a thing. And again, Mike at the time went, "Oh, hey, Ableton Live School are looking for educators." And I was like, "Well, I'm pretty green with Ableton, but I'm happy to learn." And they said, "Well, what they want is they actually just want musicians teaching, the program. We can teach you the program. You just got to stay a lesson ahead." So that's exactly what I did. I stayed one lesson ahead,
great,
and was one lesson ahead of all the all the students.
Yeah.
But I think the musicianship and everything like that was able to, really be a beneficial experience for them. So became a real quick study in Ableton, and found that I really loved that process again of just going, okay, how do we get this out to the audience? And how do we get a really exciting show? How do we replicate that? How do we replicate that live? And, I'm skipping through a bunch here.
Yeah, that's okay.
Then I started to do a couple of arrangements, even with Broods, who were, really, really hot at the time. Our LA show, it was at the Fonda, and downstairs was sounding, up the top was the gallery. And it's quite close to the stage. And it was Taylor Swift, Joel Little, who'd produced Bruise's stuff and Lord's stuff, but then now produces for Taylor and others. Ellie Goulding, there was a band called Walk the Moon, a bunch of actors and actresses. It was the place to be in LA that night. And all the band Haim, and yeah, man, what a night. So you look up on the drums and you see that wall of faces there, and you just go, okay, Jolie, don't fuck up.
Wow, man. Incredible.
It was around that time that I was starting to produce a lot, and I produced some records for some artists on Warner, and I had started to work. I'd done a couple of those like a version segments, which is a bit like the Radio 1 Live Lounge, in which you had to produce up a cover. And so I was beginning to music direct some baby artists on these shows. But I really had a deep knowledge into the technology at the time as well. So record labels were loving it because I could get their records to sound like it was live, which was a real big frustration for record labels. They would go to their shows of their new artists, and it would sound nothing like the records that So I became known for being able to achieve a really good sound. And so from there, EDM culture was huge. And DJs wanted to figure out how to make their live show better. So I became known as the guy who could take a DJ show and turn it live. So did that with a couple of guys. Hayden James was maybe one of the first ones. Then Kamada, and then I got a call from Peking Duk. And they were one of the biggest acts in Australia. And we did a huge show for I think Splendor in the Grass. It's about 2017 now. And it was, we had a huge touring party at 35. It was a brand new show.
Wow.
And we really went in hard on how to make this show sound phenomenal. And it was still to this day one of the best shows I've ever done. I actually, the first time they called me was to do an ARIA's performance a couple of years before, which is our Grammys in Australia. And again, similar thing. It was just getting them to print stems, opening up the parts, sampling those stems onto live instruments, using a bunch of functionality in Ableton to play, hook the instruments up to Ableton to play it live. Then working with the front of house engineers going, hey, is that sounding right? Working with a mic engineer to make sure that the musicians can respond well, and then having the technology there that's working such that it feels like an instrument. So again, going back to those early lessons with Kevin Hathaway was, you don't want to have to think when you're on stage.
Yeah, sure.
All you want to be doing on stage is responding musically and responding to the audience.
Yeah,
so
sure.
If you can make the technology so easy that it just becomes about the playing and just, hey, yeah, how can let's lift into the chorus. What do I need to do to do that? How do I connect with that person in the second row? That's way more interesting to an audience who really doesn't care about the redundant Matty Ableton system that you've got sitting by the stage. They don't care.
Exactly. Yeah.
They want to sing, Stranger, Will You Walk Me Home? Or, with, I got pulled in by Charlie XCX's team she was in Australia to do a couple of things, and her audience wants to sing, Boys, or whatever song it is. Then, so number one, audience focus, and using technology to achieve that is the real through line there.
Yeah,
so then, finishing the story from Peking Duk, then people just wanted that sound, and I think that integrated approach. And I've got a manner of working with people and going, hey, have you thought about this? This is an option. And also going back, detailed pre-production. I don't want any decisions to be made in rehearsals. If we're making decisions in rehearsals, we're making them far too late.
Sure. Yeah.
We need to make a show like we're making an album. We're working on an arena tour through the States at the moment, and we're talking about this is a movie. So we need to be just as detailed in all the pre-production, making sure that does everything hit exactly as we want it to.
Sure.
And then in rehearsals, it's just making sure that the performance equals what we've done, and if there needs to be any minor tweaks. And as well, just, from the larger scale of things, from generally the music director is such a lightning rod for every department, because music is what starts these things. So the LED and the screen content and the pyro gags can't be built unless they know what's happening with the music. So music leads
Absolutely.
it.
Yeah, sure.
That's when, Parkway Drive called me at the same time. And
Hmm.
the call from Parkway was, oh, hey, do you know any string players? And so going back to the classical roots,
Mm,
and they were using Pro Tools at the time. And I said, well, let's switch to Ableton. Let's work with
hmm
the front of house. Let's work on
mm,
the mix.
mm,
Let's um, let's look at with the string players what needs to happen there. Let's work
mm,
at how do we get a really wonderful string sound out front when you've got
mm,
open mics,
mm,
but you
mm,
also have a great performance. So working out the right blend of tracks to live,
mm, mm,
and what needs to be on track, what doesn't need to be.
mm,
Then working with the guys on, hey, what tempos are right here, what
mhm,
feels good, and then that just developed naturally. Then
mm,
a guy that used to do some stuff for them live didn't became unresponsive to emails, and they're just like, okay, Joel, hey, here's a script of how we see
mm.
our next tour working,
Wow.
and it was they wanted to walk through the audience, and Winston said I wanted it to feel like Rocky entering an arena. I was like,
Yeah.
I can do that. And
Wow.
then I remember sending him the first pass, and he
Mm.
goes, no. And I went, no.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it's just a little bit too horror and scary. And so then we banded around some other ideas, and he goes, actually, I'm thinking this sound reference, this sound reference.
Hmm. Hmm.
I turn around 24 hours, and there we go.
Yeah.
And
Oh,
that
man.
was,
Great.
you know,
Yeah.
so
That's amazing. Dude, there's so much like in that journey that we could dive into deeper. And it's super inspiring because honestly, when I was thinking to establish this channel and I wanted to give a platform to drummers who kind of started their journey as drummers and percussionists and then went on to like broaden their musical skill set, I suppose you could say, and dive into something different and then end up succeeding in that, but coming at everything from the perspective of a drummer. And that's like exactly what you're doing. You're one of the first guys I thought of. I'm like, man, I'd love to chat with Joel about how he's doing what he's doing now, because it's super, super cool. And I mean, I was going to ask you, like, how did the transition of you going from like player to producer MD, but it really sounds like it was kind of working, like the two things were working simultaneously throughout your journey. You were picking up things from the Royal College days that you're using today still, in terms of producing and creative choices and arranging and all that kind of stuff. So I guess now that you have your business established, like of, Farland Creative, where people are coming to you like specifically for this thing, and you're in a position to like potentially hire drummers or percussionists for shows. You've obviously got a lot of experience in that, being a drummer yourself, playing on huge festivals and TV shows and stuff like that. So what do you look for if there's like a young drummer watching this who wants to get into this world of playing for big artists and tours? What are you looking for in a drummer, and what are some skill sets that you think guys today can perhaps work on more and focus on more if they want to get into this kind of pop world, I suppose?
That's a great question. My big thing is that the playing, that just has to be taken care of.
Sure.
So anyone who really comes and auditions, or that we're even looking at approaching, the playing is not even a consideration. If you've come across the desk, you can play.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
So, and in that, so to open that up, it's got to be someone who plays for the song. So, and generally, not many fills.
Mm-hmm.
No fills unless asked.
Yeah, sure. Love that approach.
Yeah. And so play exactly what's on the record and on the reference. And don't deviate is the first one. So obviously great time, So the attitude of, you know, you're not there for you.
Mm.
I remember going for a walk with a drummer a year or two ago, who is a phenomenal drummer. I love his playing. And I said, hey, this thing that the band was a bit, the artist had a couple of fusion-y type things. And so we needed, there are certain players who you go to for certain things. And someone recommended him. And my approach is very much to get a feel and a read on someone in person. And I said, so we'd have to lock your parts down. So every night you'd have to play the same notes, more or less. You know, you can change up a little feel here and there, but it needs to stay the same. Goes, I'd love to offer it to you if you'd be happy to do that. And he goes, that's not me.
Yeah, wow.
Full credit to him, because he needed to express himself. He was one of the most incredible soloists. Small group playing, fusion playing, incredible. But when it came down to playing for an artist where we needed him and any musician just to be really consistent. The artist has got so much going on in their lives that they can't worry about us. It just needs to work. Be great and feel awesome. So yeah, first thing, play the parts. Second thing, be a real easy going. You know, if the MD asks or the artist asks you to do something, yeah.
Sure. Yep.
Cool.
Yep.
You know, you're there for them, or if that's not reasonable, I would go, I can do this. You know, and be solutions based. And I think especially you're one cog of a really big team. On the news show, which I do for the ABC, there's 300 people on that production.
Oh my gosh! Wow.
And you know, the drummer, sure, has to be great, and is the backbone of the show, and the feel needs to be amazing. So great feel, great time, play the parts, and know how to program. So and your own electronics is this is specifically for going into pop.
Yeah, but it's great to know. Yeah.
Yeah. Own your own electronics and know how to program an SPD. And if someone, so generally I'll send a USB or send files to the drummer, have a Dropbox set up. Okay, here's the files for this song. Here's the file for this song. Here's your kick pad. Here's your kick trigger. And then generally I do have a chat with the drummers about what they'd like on track and what they'd like, you know, what works well for them. And I'll come with a suggestion. I'll just go, this is what I'm thinking. And then the drummer might go, might feel better if I do this, might feel better if I do that. So that week or two of pre-production before rehearsals is really important. And I think that's the final thing. Rehearsals are not for learning notes. Turn up to rehearsals with parts memorized.
Yeah, sure.
And the arrangements memorized. Sure, have your notes in case the MD wants to go at a, you know, oh, can we go from the second chorus? Oh yeah, this bit. Okay, great. But yes, that piece of advice was given to me, and I very much took heed. Which is, yeah, definitely rehearsals are not for learning notes. Turn up with everything, not just learnt, but memorized. And if it's a track without click, and this is a trick that Ralph Salmons taught me, bring your own metronome. Bring like a little iPod head earpiece, which is really great because that lets in other sound. And so you can run your own click. And even at cover bands and things like that, play to your own click, or start it off so it gets steady, and then, you know, turn it off after, you know, 8 bars.
Sure. Yeah.
Because time is definitely the it's your biggest responsibility as a drummer.
Yeah, sure. Man, that's such like an amazing insight, because I think like a lot of the world of being a pop drummer or pop musician for that matter at all is a little bit like, it's a little bit vague, because like if you look at your journey as a typical like music student, going to music high school, then college, and your focus is just to learn like how you can play your instrument the absolute best you can. And then when you get into this world of pop, like you say, that's a given. You have to do that. It's just now this whole other skill set and focus of the consistency and the attitude and the appreciation of playing for the song and playing for the music. And I think that's where potentially a lot of musicians would struggle. They think like, yeah, I can do this gig. Yeah, I'll go on tour, whatever. It'd be great. I can do my thing. And it's really like, no, man, you got to like, rein it in and listen to the song. It's not, like you say, it's not about you anymore. It's about like using what you can do as a musician to serve someone else. So yeah, that's great to hear that straight from you, because you're living that every day. And I guess like, because you've had such an extensive background in drumming for these major artists as well, do you see the role of the drummer differently to maybe other producers who pull together shows? Or I mean, of course you have a very balanced view of pulling the whole show together, but like, do you see how they can be utilized more, or doing more with what the drummer position can be?
No, not particularly.
No.
I think in general, it's about every musician has all those responsibilities.
Mm-hmm.
No learning at rehearsals.
Yeah, sure.
And consistency, a bit like you when you're playing with Cirque. If you hit a crash score in the wrong place, like one of the tumblers might think that's a
Yeah, for sure.
Like what you play is actually a bit more life and death than me.
Yeah, I mean, I guess in some ways it can really, of course it can throw people off, but yeah, I think we're lucky with Cirque in the sense that we get some flexibility in some specific moments, which is cool, like, because you get that little taste of like musical freedom and expression, but then like you say, there are certain points that have to be like the same every day, because it's a cue for for lighting or automation or doing a trick on stage. So yeah, it's there are certainly some parallels, but I'm curious now, what percentage of your work is like producing and MDing versus actually playing? Like, are you doing many gigs as a player, or is it mostly just like, I haven't.
I generally, if I play, it's now just in the studio if I'm making some tracks, or I produced Tones and I's latest single, and I played some toms because we needed them there, because it can just be quicker.
Yeah, sure. Just jump in
and especially with the music that I'm making is pretty commercial. It's pretty it's, and then if I need to get some live drums recorded, I've got a couple of guys who have their drums set up really well mic'd all the time, that they just say, oh hey, the ARIA's just gone, tones. We had a very, very tight turnaround to pull the track that she did together. And it was Danny Ferrugia, and he has, I don't know if you know Danny, but
I just did a chat with him like this last week about his recording setup and recording from home. So yes, very well.
So I called Danny and just go, hey, great. He did it that day. I had files that night, and everything was fine. It was great. And he laid down all the percussion stuff. And it was a really great, I think at this level, just going back to that thing, I need the drummers and the musicians to make my job easy.
For sure.
So it was a cover of Xanadu, and there was a bit of a medley. Oh, that's right. It was an Olivia Newton-John medley, and it was going from Xanadu into You're the One That I Want. And had a couple of emails with Danny just going, hey, thinking this, here's the reference at Electrolyte, and he just goes, concert toms, Cabasa, shakers, and I was like, perfect, hit it. And he goes, how do you find this? And it was just the first pass, and it was perfect. Done.
Man, he's a legend. He's got his setup like so dialed in, and he really loves it as well, which is great. He's not coming at the online recording thing from a business point of view. He's genuinely like passionate about what he's doing and has such an incredible like span of knowledge and musical experience to just pull references out like, oh, you want that thing? Yeah, I got that. Yeah, you want this thing? Yeah, no worries. It's great.
And his feel as well. I think going back to what I'm looking for in a drummer is a feel.
Sure. Yeah, man.
How do you just get it feeling great for the performers?
And there's one thing to like, getting it to feel good, another avenue, but like making it feel good with a click or with a track, and still having that human element. What's that line of like, human feel, but like not flamming with backbeats and stuff like that. Yeah, for sure, man. I guess just to wrap it up, if there's a drummer or a musician watching who wants to get into the world that you're in of like the producing, pulling together shows, what do you think some of the main things are that are important? Like obviously like programming, knowledge of technical stuff, but more like are there certain personality traits that you think are really important, or anything that people should like make sure they've got that have studied, like just keen to hear your thoughts on that.
I think it's really important to watch what people are doing at the gigs that you want to do.
Yeah, great.
So it's really wonderful to be able to watch what Tony Royster Jr. is doing with Katy Perry, right? And you watch the drum cam footage, which he's great at putting up there. Now, what's great about that is that he's doing a great mixture of electronics and live. I think for someone starting out, though, your first gig's probably going to be at a club. Or at, a small... Your first gig will not be Wembley Stadium. So get to know. So one of the reasons that I got all that work with all the dance music crew was that they were my friends.
Yeah, sure.
Rufus de Sol and Hayden and Kamada, Peking Duk guys. We'd see each other, and Alice in Wonderland, and we'd see each other on a Friday night, and we'd go to each other's gigs. And so same with that, go and hang out with the gig that you want to do, know that group of people who are doing them and understand how they make it. So for getting that first gig, you're not going to do it by sitting in practice room. It's really important. You need to be able to take care of business. But in order to having an understanding of going to shows and standing out front, just going, yeah, that sounds great. Go to as many shows as you can. If you're at uni and you want to do this as a career, go to shows 4 nights a week. Go to big shows, go to little shows. Understand how the sounds that are made for the music that you want to make. The amount of musicians, even now, I'm still teaching how to program an SPD properly.
Yeah, well,
crazy.
Yeah. It's such a staple, piece of equipment now in the scene. So yeah, that's huge. Yeah, man. Wow. And I guess that's it. Like both of these things go hand in hand, whether you want to get into the world of being a musician for this type of thing or a producer where you're pulling, the shows together themselves. Like,
I think the role's both these days. I think when you play, being able to hear it from the audience's perspective, and I think specifically I make song-based music. The main purpose of most of the work that I work in is to to serve a vocal.
Mm-hmm.
And so how does the parts work around that? Actually, that's the other thing then, is learning parts note for note,
Mm-hmm.
transcribing them. And I really needed to work on my pocket of my R&B type feel. And I went to see a guy called Carlos Hercules in the UK when I was living there. And he got me to transcribe note for note. One week it was a country thing. Another week it was, I don't know, Macy Gray. Another week it was, but we're talking every little fill, every little ghost note.
Wow.
Transcribing note for note. And I guess same thing with musical theatre things. It's if you're going into a musical theatre show, you're not playing for you. You're going into depth for that drummer.
Yeah.
So
of course.
Which you say, of course.
Well, yeah.
It's really funny. Some drummers don't have, and I think that's particularly a drum thing, is because everyone's ghost notes and feels are pretty personal. You know, are you accenting the hats with the shaft, the stick, or the tip? That's the level of detail that is going into sub. You know, which actually likely your first gig to get in will be subbing.
Of course, yeah. I mean, that's the interesting thing. I think many musicians go on this journey of becoming really great at their instrument, and they're like, okay, how can I make money? Oh, musical theatre, that's a cool gig. Cirque du Soleil, I get so many messages from people about like, how do I get into Cirque du Soleil? Because, you know, I hear it's a great company to work for and it's a steady job and all that. But they don't realize, like, both theatre and Cirque, like, you have to play, but you have to like rein in any kind of like, you know, thought of like, I'm just going to get out there and do my thing and shred and, you know, blah, 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 especially with theatre, like, and especially for subbing, like even more so. Like if you're playing a theatre show and it's your book, then, you know, you can put your nuances here and there. But if you're coming into to sub for someone on a theatre gig, that's an extra level of like, cloning that you have to do and like consistency that you have to try and match. So, but it's that paycheck thing, man, that kind of comes up with people like, oh, I want to make money playing music. But it's like, well, okay, cool. But you got to like rein the ego in and like, and just, appreciate what you're doing from a bigger viewpoint.
And I think that's it. I mean, when you are paid by someone else to play, you're doing their vision.
For sure.
You're more than welcome to go and do your own project. And actually, I highly encourage it because I think that's a great outlet for so many people where you get to make the calls. And especially at the beginning, nowadays I'm in a wonderful position where I can, at this level, you can call people like Danny Ferrugi and just go, hey, I need, it was a 2-line email. It was, here's the track. Can you replace my demo drums? I want it to feel like authentic Jeff Lynne ELO era. And I need it to feel exactly like you're the one that I want. 3 lines. And then I send it to him and he sends it back and I can trust him because he's got this wealth and depth and, you know, I hope he listens to this.
I'll make sure I send it to him, don't worry.
The same, you know, Lee Fisher is another great example of that. Dave Jenkins Jr. is a great, you know, this is specifically speaking to Australians. And they understand, they get the creative freedom because they understand what the job is. But they know the rules to play by. So I didn't get, so on his own, without even bringing it up, Danny brought out the concert toms and the cabasses, and it was only once they turned up on the track that I went, amazing call.
Yeah.
I trusted him because he'd earned that level of trust. So going back to the early players, you got to earn that trust, and you just earn that trust by being consistent, chill, and great every single time you pick up sticks.
Man, huge. There's so much great insight and wisdom in our chat today, man. Thank you so much for taking time out of your super busy schedule to talk about things. Yeah, I learn a lot. I know a lot of guys watching this are going to take so much from it. So yeah, man, really, really appreciate you. Where can people find you if they want to follow you or check out what you're doing or you see what shows you're working on? Or
I'm traditionally terrible at social media, but at Farland Creative is, we've got there's 5 people working for us now, and a couple of MDs. Trish, who's one of our MDs, started working with us last year. She's phenomenal. And then, so that's at Farland Creative, and farlandcreative.com. You can see a bunch of our work there. And touring at the moment, we've got Tones and I's show. We've got Parkway Drive about to start Europe festivals. What else is coming up? There's something coming up I can't really speak about just yet. And Tkay Maidza at we've got Peach PRC about to go through the States, and then she's doing Splendor in the Grass as well. I think, and then we're doing a charity concert in Queensland called Songs for Hope. So yeah.
Man, that's a busy time. Oh my gosh. Incredible, dude. Wow, that's super inspiring to hear you chat about all this stuff, man. Yeah, thank you again. And I hope we can catch up again in person sometime soon.
That'd be awesome. Thanks, mate.
Cool. Thanks, man. Speak soon.
Okay.